Nigel Simpson joins us, and I've called it Catchment Considerations, Nigel. So would you like to, whilst Neil's putting up your presentation, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us what you're going to talk about? Thanks very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Right, I'm Nigel Simpson. I'm one of the leads in the Catchment Sensitive Farming for agriculture. We hopefully will be working as part of Natural England for a good few years. DEFRA has just increased our funding and asked us to do more. My phone number is there on the screen for you if you would like to contact me afterwards. But certainly it would be good to work with you. In the Catchment Sensitive Farming works with DEFRA and the Environment Agency. We get our data and our evidence of where problems are from the Environment Agency. We don't work as regulators. Everything we do is voluntary, and we work with farmers and agronomists and other partners across England in what we call priority areas to improve not only the quality of our water, but also our air. Everyone farms in a catchment, and in many cases, areas are important for groundwater as well as surface water, particularly for drinking. But if there's any contamination of groundwater, it is for geological time, and that would knock out use of a borehole for drinking if we had it polluted. So it's very important that we do minimize our pollution risks and losses so that we don't actually cause any problems. Sorry, Neil, could you go back to the previous slide, please? Yeah, thank you. These target areas that we work at the moment, this one is one that shows you where people are eligible for both our help currently in the red areas and in terms of our advice, and eligible for grants which are specific to what we call high risk activities. But that's not necessarily where we would necessarily have pesticide issues as we speak. So if I can have the next slide, please, Neil. Right, so you'll see that the areas have changed slightly in this particular slide to reflect the fact that pesticides at the moment are something regarded as an issue, as in current problem, in a more limited area than where we would work normally. So just to make that comparison, this is available to you if you use the magic.gov website and you switch on the countryside stewardship targeting and scoring layers, as you can see on the left-hand side, and then tick the relevant boxes on the left-hand side. Okay, next slide, please, Neil. Right, pollution of water from pesticides can occur not only in storage, and there's a leaflet called AIS 16, which you can download from the HSE website, sprayers and filling, which we'll talk about today, overspraying of watercourses, drift, which we therefore have layer wraps and buffer strips to try and minimize, drain flow, which can be linked to crack flow, and that can cause inadvertent losses. Then there's surface runoff, not only from tracks and hard surfaces like public highways and yards, but also where slopes exist. Cleaning, as in the yard again, which we'll talk about today, and disposal, particularly important in relation to groundwater, because we have lost groundwater sources over the years, sometimes through dumps and or poor disposal. If I can have the next slide, please. Right, well, between 20 to 70% of pesticide losses are believed to occur in the yard, now with an average of 40%. So it's a considerable area for risk in terms of causing contamination. And you can see on that slide there, that sort of clinker yard has got obviously the potential not only for ponding, but also runoff across the yard. And although that particular ATV is not connected to a pelleter, pelleters as well as sprayers can also be a problem for us when we're putting on slug pellets. So that's another reason for thinking about this topic today. Okay, if you can turn to the next slide, please, Neil. Right, you notice those fertilizer tanks, those liquid tanks are not bunded. And obviously sprayers are often used to fill with fertilizers as well as sprays. And therefore there's a risk there potentially of fertilizers getting into water as well. So there's another risk that we need to mitigate. Right, the next slide, please. Right, with regard to what we can do, there is a thing called a biobed, which is a mix of equal volumes of soil, straw, and compost, which will over time degrade pesticides. So these are sort of shallow pit filled with the same. They go down to 1 meter in depth. In the middle of that one, on the left-hand side at the top, you can see the sump, and that will then connect to a trickle irrigation pipe that then goes across the site, which is then grassed over, so that the pesticides which have come from a filling area can go then through that biobed, and hopefully we will get what's called a leachate, which then can be disposed of in a sort of non-crop area. You can have the offset type, which is where it's offset from the sprayer filling area, or a drive over type, which is much less common because it requires quite a lot of expense on steel. But that would achieve the same issue. There are grants available, as you can see on the right-hand side, that vary in the amounts available, but with you have a line biobed plus a biobed, filling area, then it comes out at £118 per metre squared in relation to the grants available. If you've got an existing washdown area which is already adequate, then we can add and bolt on a line biobed to go alongside it. Okay, could you have the next slide, please? A biofilter is an alternative to the sort of outside biobed, where this can go either outside the shed, and these are boxes stacked like IBCs, which will give you the same effect. Those boxes will be filled with that mix that I described earlier, and they will be trickled down through the boxes, and that will then give you very good quality water at the end of it, albeit maybe contaminated with sediment and organic matter. So I wouldn't necessarily put it back in the sprayer, but it does go to a disposal area quite easily. That £9.90 per unit is for the entire stack, by the way. Sorry, the next slide, and that's the grant available. Basically, there's roughly 50% funding for many of our things. This one works out slightly differently. In relation to sprayer filling areas, we can also roof over a sprayer filling area, providing you get planning permission. I should have mentioned that for a biobed, you also need to apply for what's called a T32 waste exemption permit. But by the same token, we can then look at doing things to best practice. The sprayer washdown area, if that's all you needed, would be just £40 per metre squared in terms of grant available, but that will then protect you from inadvertent runoff and contamination of water, so it's a contained area. And then you would potentially need groundwater authorization or similar to dispose of pesticides in that situation with that biobed. We also can link to rainwater harvesting, and that can improve the quality of the water that you're being able to use. And that will then have various grant rates. We won't concentrate on them now, but that's just to make the point that this is part of an integrated setup, and you can then link it all together, both for the benefit of climate change and better quality of spray water. Okay, and the next one, please. We don't only work in the yard, we also work in the field. And obviously with LERAPs and other considerations, we want to protect watercourses. And so on that basis, we do offer various grants for various widths of buffer strips. And those are two of the examples given there. There are other ways and means by which we can reduce runoff and try and improve water quality as well. So we would discuss with you on an individual basis what you needed. And then finally, just to talk about the fact that we do one-to-one advice. So a catchment officer will come and visit the site with you, discuss what you might need, how it might fit, best location, and all the other things that you would need to do. We can also offer you specialist engineers who come out, and that report on the right is an example of one of the types of visit that we offer. And those are all free of charge to you. So on that basis, providing you in the right location, we can help you with that effect. But the same sort of advice can be obtained when you start to look at the VI website, which is the next slide, thank you. And on that website, you will be able to download things like the Biobed manual, and also these various videos on rainwater harvesting and building a biobed, not to mention the other leaflets, and we're updating some of those as we speak. And then, as Ian said earlier, proper planning does prevent poor performance. And so hopefully we can work with you to plan better and work with you. So if you want to find out who your catchment officer is locally, then you go onto the .gov website, type in CSFO in the search box, and you should find the local CSFO's contact details. Many thanks. Is there any questions, please?